Hey everyone, Bailey here from Mindrise, psychotherapist, coach, and author of Own Your Power. And today you are in for a real treat. We are talking to Lance Essihos. He is such a rock star, and we're going deep. So Lance is a visionary who has experienced life through three very, very different lenses: as a professional hockey player, as a bartender, and now as an innovative entrepreneur and podcaster. And that's where our paths had intersected. As an experienced veteran with adversity, he has faced some of life's most difficult challenges, grinding his way through hockey ranks, traveling the world as a bartender, even through his personal battle with drugs and alcohol for well over a decade, including the tragic loss of his brother to suicide, then followed by the loss of his father to cancer only a year later. Lance hit rock bottom. And in his darkest of days, he made a promise to himself that he would create a new life and make an impact and inspire the masses, just like leaving the world a better place than he found it. And sometimes we come to that when we are completely void of it. So you guys are really going to enjoy this conversation with Lance today. He is the founder of Mic Up Podcast Productions, as well as the host of the University of Adversity. Awesome podcast. Definitely check it out. We're going to be diving in today and today's episode about what exactly is adversity and how do we master it? What is that path? What does that look like? So join me as we jump in at having a conversation about adversity with Lance Essihos. Lance, I'm so excited to have you here with us today because, in the short time that we've known each other, you are, in my opinion, my humble opinion, one of the most real people that I have ever encountered. I'm just willing to share, I didn't wake up like this, there's been a journey to get here. So thank you so much for joining us for today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's very kind of you. That's probably one of the best things you could hear from somebody. So thank you. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, but it's true. I think, and this speaks a lot to your work with your podcast, the University of Adversity, because you have navigated adversity. And I'm really excited to talk to you today about not only the journey that you've had to be where you are today, which for everybody listening, go on to YouTube so you can watch Lance and his golden delicious tan, because he's in Costa Rica right now. But you didn't wake up in Costa Rica. There's been a journey to get there.
Yeah, it's been such a wild ride. I mean, I've had to go through so many different layers of adversity and so many different things, as we all do. I'm just another person with a story and stories that, things happened and, you learn the lessons along the way and, you end up in this spot. And it's just, there's been so many different layers that, I look back and I'm like, wow, that, what a ride. So yeah, right. I mean, it's been a really, really interesting, challenging, beautiful journey so far.
Right. Well, and what allows you though, let's just dive right in, right? We can cut the small talk, but what allows you to enjoy the ride? Because for so many of us, we take adversity and we make some bullshit narrative about ourselves, our capability. We fill that narrative with shame and inadequacy, and then we play that out into our life, which I'm sure you've navigated that because, again, we kind of learn not to do that by having done it. Mm. So what allows you to approach it with a different lens? And has it always been that way for you?
No, I grew up in a very negative family, lots of love. They meant well as most, but it was very, very scarce, very fear-based, right? Very lack mentality. And they did their best with what they knew. But that was just, I didn't grow up with a family that had a lot of money. It was just it was a struggle. Everything was a struggle. Everything was so is the language everyone used too. And even to this day, I talk to my mom and it's like, your language, watch how you speak, because you're literally creating these things. Your words are like, it's like magic. You're creating the stuff. And I guess over the years, there was just so many different things that I had to go through and so many challenges that I've been unpacking to this day. I'm trying to understand like where things unraveled and why I picked up so many addictive behaviors, why I did the certain things. And, there was a time where, I drank a ton, partied, did all of the things that people do. Well, some do. And I was pretty lost in that world. And I didn't know what an abundance mindset was, or, I've heard in theory what being positive is, but I didn't understand it. For me, it was always, why is this happening to me? Why does this shit keep happening to me all the time? Like, it's your fault. It's everybody else's fault. And I never really understood the value of accountability, right? Things that went wrong in my life. There was always, when my hockey career failed, oh, it was the coach's fault, or that other guy, it's somebody's fault, right? Why I didn't make it to a certain level, even in the hospitality industry, somebody else's fault. But I never owned to myself, like, well, what are you doing? Like, why, what is the reason? And I guess that's been kind of a journey, is kind of unlearning a lot of the bullshit stories that gave me that really cloudy lens. And as I started to practice and transition out of the bar world and kind of into this more personal development, personal growth, and healing myself, I started to understand the difference between being a victim and being empowered. And, really understanding and owning my shit, and knowing that in order for me to really create what I want and do all the things, I need to get real serious and clear and look myself in the mirror at like, what is the story I'm telling myself? Like, why do I keep going through this shit? Like, I need, and when you start to do that, you start to practice gratitude and journaling and meditation, all the things. It's a commitment. It's work. It's a daily practice, and it takes time. And that's when the narrative started to change. Things started to sort of evolve. And when you practice it long enough, you sort of become a different person. And so from here to 2017 to 2021, a lot has happened. A lot has shifted. And it's really been conscious of watching how I speak to myself. I'm very conscious about it. Even when I notice others say, I'm like, hey, just be careful how you say that, because you're literally telling people you can't do something. And it's just not like, and not to be somebody that like goes around and telling people that, uninvited, but it's like, I notice it a lot. I notice that a lot of people that I'm close to, how they speak about themselves. And it's like, and then it makes me realize about myself. So it's been a journey to kind of really get there. And by no means do I have it all figured out now, but I'm definitely better than I was last year. And I'm definitely better than I was, or a little wiser and a little bit smarter than I was, a month ago, even just from what I'm up to now. So yeah, it's definitely not, to go back to your question, it's definitely not been something that I've always had. It's been a constant evolving process.
Right. And I love what you're saying, because sometimes like our own journey is born out of a place of necessity, right? Like if you were already handed an apple, you wouldn't go looking for an orchard because you have the apple in hand. Mm. And the most interesting part is that sometimes we don't realize what we don't have, or and it's not a lack mentality. It's just, when you are raised in a negative or waiting for the other shoe to drop environment or family, like, and that's the language, that's the culture, that's what we adopt. And sometimes the revolution, if you will, is when we depart from that and we are looking at it from the outside perspective and starting to see like how that narrative plays out into the ways that we show up in our world. Okay? And I'm with you. There is a major difference between that blame game, pointing the finger, right? Because what's that saying that they say? Like when you point your one finger, you've got four pointing right back at you, right?
Yeah.
So what does it mean for you to step into the place of owning your power and owning your responsibility and making that shift, and also giving yourself grace along the way? Because many times, especially as an athlete, like when we have a goal that we're working to reach, sometimes we'll just barrel at that goal versus understanding that there's going to be an ebb and flow. Like, yeah, sure, we start with a journaling practice and we get a couple ahas, but then life happens. There's backslides. Like, how do you allow yourself to adopt and embrace grace along the way of the learning?
Such a great question. Yeah. I mean, that has been something that I am working on every day, because I've beat myself up so badly over the years about as little as if I miss something in my daily routine, which is so counterproductive. Like, oh, you can't even do this, you can't even do that. I start to have these conversations with myself. And, it's really, really important to have grace for ourselves, to have the intention, have the goal, but understand that, like, things will happen, and being okay with it, the zigging and zagging. And that's what makes life fun too, because if we had it all figured out, then we'd be like, oh, this was so easy, this was no fun. Like, it's really, it's something that I also learned a lot from Aubrey Marcus, was just like, having that grace for yourself, and like, it's okay, and a lot of that, his teaching was like that. And I started to realize, I was like, oh yeah, like it's, and I needed to hear it from a source like that. And I never understood that before. But like, really, like, there's going to be days where things don't go the way you want them to. And then you just have to, those are the days I feel are most important, because those are the days where you'll really fall off the deep end if you don't allow yourself to kind of stay on track, to feel the emotions, do all that, but then also let it go and just realize, well, tomorrow's a new day. It's okay. Right. It's okay.
Right.
It's that compassion, that acceptance of yourself, and not getting too carried away on what you didn't do. And this is something every single day that I still struggle with. And it comes down to compassion and self-love for yourself. It really is so important to have that grace, right? Because then when things are going really well, you just double down. You make sure you're in flow. Boom, let's do this. Oh, today's not one of those days. Cool. All right. That's kind of where I'm at with everything, with that kind of stuff.
Right. But okay, let's get real here, because we talk a good game about self-love, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we talk a good game of like, this is happening in your life, or you're responding this way because of your sense of self, or your sense of self-worth. And so then we say, like, okay, well, if the fuel tank of self-worth is low, I've got to raise it up, right? And then we'll put some pressure on ourselves. But like, let's get real. What are the metrics of self-acceptance, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what does self-love actually mean? What's the inner narrative that, like,
this is a great question, because this is what I dealt with in my ayahuasca ceremony. This was literally I asked the shaman on night 2, and I like, this is so cool that this comes up, because I think it's really important. I said to him, or the maestro, I said, look, I feel like there's a block in what's going on in my life. I was getting translated. I can't speak Spanish, and I know I'm supposed to be here, but I feel this block. And he goes, self-love. In order for me, and like, this is in theory, a lot of people know this. In order to fully love my family and do everything, I need to love myself. And I said, yeah, okay, great. Like, I know that already, right? So I thought, oh, tonight's going to be an easy ride. Tonight's going to be just about self-love. And no, the self-love is loving your shadow, your dark side, just as much, and accepting it and sitting with it and inviting it to the table as much as you want to love the positive and the bright side of your life. It's just as important. But a lot of people don't want to deal with that stuff. And that to me is the deepest level of self-love, is loving all of the shit, all of the stories, all of the stuff that makes you who you are, and allowing that to come through, not spiritually bypassing it with positive stuff. Like being positive is important. It's all important. That's what you want to focus on. But some days things are going to suck. Some days you're going to be dealt with stuff, and you're going to have to, all the stuff that's in our subconscious and what we've dealt with in these stories that we tell ourselves, they got to be processed. And when they're processed, it allows them, the dark comes into the light, and you're allowed to fully see the light. You're allowed to fully experience the love because you've experienced the dark. And that was the download that I had. That was the lesson that I had. And I needed to learn that because I've been so adamant on trying to being positive out of my shit that I need to sit with. So I had to sit with that the entire night. And it was really, really challenging because it was something that I hadn't really done. And all these things about spiritual bypassing was coming up. And I was like, oh my God, I understand. Like, and I shared it the next day, and I was like, wow, this was so important for me to realize. And not saying anybody's got to go do psychedelics or anything. This was for me, my journey. And I am so grateful to have seen that, because people talk about self-love as this fluffy thing. And I'm so glad you brought this up, but it's not always. It's like loving the shit too. Like bringing it into the light. Like, come on in. You're just as important because you make up who I am. And then it doesn't have the power over you anymore. It's like, oh, okay. You're important to getting me who I was. Now it's time to sit with you, heal you, and bye-bye. So that's kind of where I'm at with that these days. Like, it really, really helped me realize.
You nailed it, Lance. And I want us to talk and put a little definition to the concept around spiritual bypassing, because this could be a first time that someone's hearing of it. But at least in my version, is a lot of times we try to like happy our way out of some shit. And the truth is, like, yes, we need happy, we need journaling, we need your meditation, we need your shaman, we need your intuitive, we need you like to have a fresh baked casserole from the grandma next door. Like, we need all the things, right? And at the same time, sometimes we need to sit at the table, and all the seats at the table are the different versions of ourselves, right? One of my versions of myself that I'm like, she and I wrestle, is my impatient self. It's not my favorite part of myself that in terms of one that I'm like happy to tell everybody about. But I have to see that she has a light in the dark too, right? My impatience is great when I channel it into my drive, but my impatience also provides for me lessons of when I need to evoke patience and take a deep breath and not lead with a sense of urgency. So it's not all negative, right? But we do try to bypass and just go happy, 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 happy. And you lose so much of the lesson and the ability to self-love with depth, rather than just like trying to paint with red, blue, yellow. It's like, yeah, but if we gave you all the colors, then the tapestry, right? The image that you're trying to create has more depth to it. And isn't that the purpose that resides within this existence that's our life?
It's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. It's a spectrum, the dark and the light, and its dualities, and you can't fully feel one without the other. And when I walked out of that, I told this on my solo episode about my complete story. If someone wants to check it out, it can. I went pretty in depth. But what I did was, when I walked out of that Maloka at 6 a.m, I was told to stay there the entire night. You can't run away. You can't do the things. You can't do that. When I walked out, I was told to stay there until the sun came up. When I walked out, I had never looked at the sun and seen light with so much gratitude in my life. Like, I get goosebumps because I had to go through so much fear and so much challenge that, oh man, like when I got out of that, it's the feeling, it's the feeling you get when something like that, when you fully feel something so challenging and then you get rewarded with this beautiful bliss. That's what life is. That's the beauty of it. And if you don't feel one or the other, like you're just stuck in the middle playing in this on the fence territory. And it doesn't make life as beautiful,
Right. And, I definitely want to toss it over to you to educate about ceremony and to educate about ayahuasca. But Lance and I had an experience together with the Temescal, which is the sweat lodge when we were in Mexico. And you nailed it. It's like we have, in that experience, had all the struggle is ceremony too. Like it is. And then coming out of that, and that, of course, it was awesome. There's that plate of fruit. And that's what I said, like the schnozberries taste like schnozberries. Like that fruit was some of the most delicious. And like you could actually, the pineapple tasted like pineapple. And swimming in the ocean, it's like you could feel every drop of water that was touching your skin. You could actually feel your life. But we need contrast.
That was such a beautiful experience. I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was exactly it. Yeah. When the coming out of that, the feeling of the air and the fruit and the team camaraderie, like everybody's like, it felt unified. We felt like we did it, and that's such a cool feeling. Yeah. That was so beautiful. And yeah, sometimes you got to power through that stuff if you really want to feel that bliss.
Right. So we're not necessarily saying, at least I'm not, and I don't feel like you are, that you have to ayahuasca, you have to do psychedelics, you have to Temescal. Like your Temescal, your ceremony might just be like going for a walk and seeing the flowers rather than thinking about your to-do list. Like it might be just that. But for anybody who is curious about that experience of ceremony, because I know you started sharing with us a little bit about your ayahuasca experience, like what drew you to that? And, what are some of the lessons that you are taking with you at this next chapter, this next season for yourself?
Yeah. Plant medicine is definitely not for everybody, especially, if you're not ready for it. There's, it's a journey, sometimes you're ready, sometimes you're not. It's not for everybody. But for me, I'm very all about other modalities that get you to a state of healing without psychedelics. Like, I've done Kundalini men's retreats, Kundalini yoga. I've done deep breath work, meditation, gratitude journaling, like deep hypnotherapy. So because I'm on a journey of healing and personal transformation, and because, my show is about that as well, I want to learn all the ways to help people. Like the more I can heal myself and the stories and the shit that's holding me back, the more I can help others do it. So for me, I was deeply called to come to Costa Rica to do this. There's certain things in our lives where they're like 10s, your intuition's like, this is a 10, ding, ding, ding. If you don't do this, you're a fool. And I'm going to just keep hitting you and doing things until you do it, because and we have to honor that. We got to pay attention to the 10s, right? Because there's a lot of 5s, a lot of 6s, but like the 9, 10s, it's like ding, ding, ding. You got to act on that. And that was one of those things I knew I had to come and do this, especially with Aubrey and that group. It was like, it was really amazing. So I had to, it was my next level of healing. And I got so much out of those 4 days that I can't imagine my life not going through that now. And again, not to say everybody's on a journey and everybody has to do what's best for them. But for me, I've also done other psychedelics and whatever, but it was exactly what I needed now. And I really want to learn the other modalities to help people get there. I want to learn breath work. I want to learn how to facilitate this stuff in my unique way. Like, because I think not everybody is ready for that stuff, because if you're not able to surrender, it's going to be the hardest experience of your life. Maybe it's what you need. Maybe it's what you don't. I don't know. But there's ways to get to a deep state, breath work and all that. And that's what I am focusing on and why I decided to do it. So, and just listening to the call as much as I can. Right. And
Lance, this is so magic, because you're right. Like, it is a listening to the call. It's a listening to the call, and like, what's calling you? You're 100% dead on. Some things are 10, some things are 5, some things are 6s. Do we know how to listen to the call? Do we even know what that sounds like? Because a lot of times, like, we're pushing through and almost forcing, right? Either a forcing of making it happen or even a forcing of the resistance. Do we even know? Like, how did you get tapped into your intuition? And I'm with you. There's lots of different modalities, but what was your path to tapping the intuition, so that when you are called to something, you know what that sounds like, rather than like, pick up eggs, pick up milk, don't forget your laundry, right? Like, what's that voice? And when did you start to recognize it?
One thing that I've always done well in my life, regardless of the silly choices I've made in between, is I've always listened to the call. It's something that I've always done from when, my hockey career ended to like the next thing. There was always pressure on me to go to university or do these things, or there's a big demand for trades. When I was graduating high school in 2001, all the baby boomers were retiring. Everyone's like, go get a trade, go become an electrician, plumber. Great careers, but they didn't feel right for me. I tried them and I felt so unhappy doing them. And I'm like, I'm not doing this just because I'm told to do it. Like, and I felt so much pressure from everybody around me to go to school and to do these things. And not to say that's not the right thing, but for me, I just felt this feeling like this isn't right. And I listened to that, and then I eventually got into an area where I thrived. It turned into a bit of a toxic environment because it was in the bars and restaurants, but I was able to communicate with people. Like, for me, connecting with humans on a level was what gives me joy. So I love like connecting with guests and giving them a good time and being able to like give them amazing experience so that they feel better than they did before. And I got addicted to that feeling. So that was kind of where and throughout that process, I made some stupid decisions probably, but like the main idea along the way was go with what feels right. I sold everything. I moved to Australia for 5 years. That was crazy. People, when I was 29, people were like, you're nuts. What are you doing? I was like, I don't care. I'm doing it because it feels right to me. And that feeling, to answer your question, that feeling is like, what makes you excited when it comes? Like what's like, whoa, like you get like a response. Just like you get a fear response, you got to pay attention to why, like, but there's this like warmth of like, whew, it's like that feels good. And sometimes we got to write it down. Sometimes we got to be like, right. I got to lean into that. But usually it's something crazy out of our comfort, because most of us are doing things that just do things to get by. But it's like that thing that's like, whoa, that's exciting. And then if you don't act on it, you'll talk yourself out of it. So I got good at just being like, I'm doing this, even though my ego is going to talk me out of it. I'm going to do it. And that's probably the best way I can describe it. And I guess for me, quitting alcohol too allowed me to quitting, like watching my diet and really paying attention to those kind of things allows me to feel more and not make my decisions based on like, because a lot of times I was drinking too much and staying up late, it was like the feelings I was getting wasn't a representation of who the real me was. And it was like from the booze and it was like I was making decisions that were just out of alignment. And then when I cleared that crap out of my life, I was like, okay, this is real. This is the real feeling. This isn't some sort of like, I don't know. And I get like that when I go off the coffee, when I go off stuff for a while, I can really tap into that. So it's been interesting with that, because I've always sort of had it, sort of known the times where I've been rewarded in life with more amazingness, that's a word, has been when I've honored it fully. So it's challenging for people sometimes though. Like it's, like, because certain things seem completely crazy and they're just not willing to do it. But you got to ask yourself, is this a 10? Is this worth it? Does this feel really good? Like, right?
Right. And I always think that there is also within us, residing within us, this art of discernment. And that art of discernment can be activated in so many different ways and different circumstances. But for me, one of the key ways in which I like to use it, and I'm curious for you, is like the discernment between, is this my intuition voice give me a heads up? Or is this my like fear, like, holy shit, am I really doing this? Like, and sometimes we throw the ego, I think gets a bad rap sometimes, but like, how are you able to find and use the art of discernment within those? Because we have lots of different voices that reside within us. Like, how do you exercise the art of discernment when going for it? Because, you host a podcast, University of Adversity. You talk to so many people about their experiences and their challenges. I'm sure that within your own journey and so many people that you've talked to, there's a lot of head noise, right? Designed to keep us safe, but safe is a metric of predictability. Life is not predictable.
Yeah. It's, for me personally, I think it comes down to fear. And I think people give another amazing download that I had with the same experience was I was shown how important it is to lean into our fears. And I think we're so scared to lean into our fears that it stops us. It keeps us like from going over that fence. So we're kind of like feel safer, but we're living in this almost like a prison because we know we want to do the thing, but we didn't. And then we're like, oh, so it's like from not facing your fear, you're almost getting the same feeling, dissatisfaction from not doing it, and it's almost worse. This is how I look at it. So I feel like when you get that fear response, it's like a test to be like, do you want the reward? Like, it's like you leaning into this, and I like, this is within reason. This isn't doing like, stupid shit that's going to get you like unsafe things, but like the little fears along the way. It's like, when you lean into those, you will get rewarded. Like, you will be rewarded. That was another thing that I had one of my nights was like, I go back and explaining the medicine because there's so many lessons. There was a lesson there where the last night I was too tired from the night before, and I didn't think my body could handle doing a certain amount. So I did way less. And the message from that was, it ended up being worse because I didn't trust myself. And the message was, you can just trust yourself. You can do this. Like, and the night before, I was so scared from the night prior that I took more and I was rewarded. So my third night was just this like mind-blowing, amazing thing. But I took more that night. I stepped into it. And then I was like, wow, I see what stepping into my fear is, because it's rewarding me with it. And then the night I didn't do that, I was like in the spot of this feeling of like, you don't trust yourself. When you don't trust yourself, you limit yourself. You can handle this. You can do all of the things. And I think it's a good way for people to understand is that like that fear is so important to lean into and to trust that everything will be okay. It always is. And it's those little responses along the way that give us those little rewards. And I guess like it's really paying attention to the feelings that you're getting, right? And sometimes the bigger calling are going to bring like the more scary feelers that you're going to have to get, because you don't just get things without some sort of like working through something. right? So yeah, that's my take on it. Fear has just been something that's held me back so much. And the fear that we're actually scared of, it's usually worse than what's on the other side of it.
Right.
And yeah, I've really, that was a huge message for me. So, and I've just been leaning into that.
Right. We talked a lot about that on the episode that we did on your podcast, is about that space of fear. So something that you said that I think is really good is like stepping into it, right? Because we are wired biologically to avoid pain and seek pleasure, right? So knowing that that's our biological wiring, when we see something as a place of adversity and adverse experience, a lot of times our natural reaction is to back up from it rather than stepping toward it, leaning into it. And I know you were talking about, like, as you lean into it, that provides the rewards. So can you talk a little bit more about like stepping into it, leaning into the thing that we're afraid of, the thing that we're scared of, and how that helps us to master adversity?
Yeah, it's the unknown and the trust factor in ourselves. It's like not doing the fear just means we don't trust ourselves fully. We don't think it's going to be okay, I feel like. Like for me personally, when I don't do the thing that I know the thing is going to bring, I feel that's kind of how I look at it now, is that we need to have faith in ourselves and our abilities to get that everything's going to be okay. And for me, there's been so many times in my life where I've let that get in the way. And there's been moments that I probably could have experienced something great, but I didn't. And that's different for everybody, right? And I think really mastering how to trust ourselves and to really have faith that what we want or what we can do is possible, but we have to be able to know that whatever we're going to go through, it's going to be okay. But a lot of times we don't think that. In the back of our mind, people are like, oh, it's not going to be okay. And that goes like deep rooted.
Oh yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's interesting. I was listening to Brene Brown the other day, and you've heard the phrase of like waiting for the other shoe to drop. And that's very much of how our fear is created. We create this narrative in our mind, and we're constantly on this like hypervigilance to wait for the attack or wait for something to happen for the other shoe to drop. And she was talking about how that saying came to be from back in the day when people lived in tenements, and how the walls were so thin and the living quarters were so cramped that literally whoever lived above you, when they came home and they went to take off their boots, you'd hear one shoe drop and you'd literally be waiting for the other shoe to drop. And it's so interesting, the historical perspective, but how much do we condition ourselves to remain in this state of hypervigilance, and how much does that keep us away from actually enjoying, right? When the pineapple tastes like pineapple, when the blue sky is so deliciously blue, when the connection that you're making with someone is so enjoyable, and at the same time, like feeling a sadness or feeling a lack, like how does this hypervigilance just hold us back from allowing ourselves to be in presence?
Yeah, it's stories. I feel like it's the stories that we tell ourselves in the present moment. It's like if we could give ourselves a clean slate every day, like today is the first day of our lives. Nothing matters before. We've learned the lessons, like we've taken the good, we've learned the bad, but it's like, okay, but that has nothing to do with right now. Like, and I can only speak for myself. It's like, because some past story of, and I'm having a lot of like resistance right now in what I'm doing, because like I have a lot of doubt, a lot of lack of belief, a lot of like judgment of all this stuff. It's because, what I'm creating, I'm comparing to the past. Well, you failed at this, Lance. You did this, you did that, you failed at that, like you let people down there, you upset them, like a lot of that stuff was alcohol induced. But I made a lot of mistakes around my choices, around letting myself and others down. So it's very easy for me to bring that into the present because it's all I know. So unlearning that shit that doesn't serve me is so important. And that clean slate, when we look at life, it's like how we look at each situation. It's a fresh, it's not like this fear has nothing to do with like what happened when 10 years ago. Like it doesn't.
Right. Oh, Lance, that's so raw and real and right now, because you're right. Like you're trying to measure yourself at present day after everything that you've done and worked on for yourself, and almost measure it by way of an old metric system that doesn't serve you. And and isn't it funny how we glass ceiling ourselves by like deciding that the height at which we can grow, or the mass at which we can grow, the light at which we can grow is based on that past old shit. And when we continue with that line of thought, that belief, that story, what it does is like that cuts the learning off at the knees and says that all of that stuff almost is like the scarlet letter on us rather than the lessons that we learned along the way. So wouldn't we say that like you got an A+ in that shit? Right. So then this course, right, that was 101 and 201, and now you're at 301. And it's like, you can't unknow the things that you know, but they don't determine how much you can grow as a person and how you're going to show up in this space.
Totally. And it goes as well as just like with Dr. Joe Dispenza. If you want to manifest new things, putting yourself in the future of who you want to be, like doing the things that person or that kind of person, how do they show up? What do they do? What do they read? Like, who is that person that you want to be in a few years? Do things that align with that. I found that to be really useful too, because like if we're trying to create and we want to have all these goals, like we can't show up as like the person that was a few years ago that, like we're at a point where like, well, what do I need to do to like create this? And sometimes you got to do different things to create different results. It sounds easy, but sometimes it's hard. It's like the habits, right? So,
well, it's so hard because in many ways, like you're making up a reality that you've never lived before. And it's interesting because so one of the divisions of Mindrise is that we teach people how to become coaches. And often people are like, well, wow, how did you grow your coaching business so quick? How did you grow your company so quickly? It's because I was living, and it's not about not being present, but I was living and doing and making choices in the right now for where I wanted to be at the end of the year. So how was I going to live this year in service of that? And that didn't mean that I was living so far in the future. It was just about alignment, like aligning our choices, our decisions, what we say yes to, what we say no to, what we're available for, what we're not available for, right? But how often do we live in that old past metric system, like glass ceiling ourselves and not really moving forward?
Yeah. All too often.
Yeah. But you are moving forward, my friend, because not only do you have the University of Adversity, and not only so for anybody who's like budding in podcast world as well, like Lance is also the founder of Mic Up Podcast Productions. But you've also had a new project up your sleeve, which I've been watching on Instagram. So if you don't follow Lance on Instagram, definitely do yourself a favor and follow him. But tell us about your new project.
Yeah. So thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. Well, it's kind of been a natural progression. I've decided to sort of take my crazy story all the things I've gone through, and combine it with the knowledge that I've acquired from the 300 amazing minds that I've had the opportunity, like yourself, to talk to, and combine a book, alchemize that into a book that's going to change people's lives. It's going to be called Mastering Adversity. And it's really developing a better understanding of ourselves first, understanding what adversity is, where it shows up, and how it shows up. And I'm going to, really 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 combine like a real like field manual for the students of life. Really, this is going to be something that involves a lot of people. It involves a lot of like energy that I've brought in from other people. It's going to be great. So yeah, that's something I'm working on. The pre-sale for that, we're launching a crowdfunding campaign. The pre-sale for that starts March 1st. So whenever this is aired. And yeah, it's super exciting. I've another deep calling that I've had is you got to write a book. Like you got to do this. Like it's something that I didn't know how it was going to happen. I didn't know like what. So, the right people came into my life and now it's happening. So I'm really, really excited.
Right, right, right. And if we would have tried to have a conversation with that guy so many years ago from the darkest of times, the one who felt like he fucked up or failed, right? If we were to talk to him, be like, so you're going to just go through even more stuff and then you're going to write a book about it. Like he probably would have looked at you like you had 100 heads, right? And be like, no. And I certainly don't want to air my my dirty laundry or my messes. Like I don't want to air that to other people. But I think it's a testament to how much we can grow as a person when we take our lessons, because that's what they are. They're not like mistakes or screw ups unless we don't derive a lesson from them. And even if that lesson is like, I'm still breathing. Hey, like when we take that, that's what determines our potential. What we've learned.
Yeah. And, since I got on this journey and with the podcast, I've always been somebody that is very vulnerable. Like anybody that's new to the show, you can pretty much, I've laid it all out there. I can't hide, I've cried, I've explained things, I've gotten mad. Like there's so many, there's rants on there. It's allowed me to be able to share my truth, which gives people the permission to do the same. Mm-hmm. And the more I am able to open up and share my truth and be vulnerable and allow others to do the same, the more I heal, the more others. And that's the magic that's created. And that has been healing for me. The podcast has completely changed my life and healed me because I get to like connect with people like yourself on this high level all the time. There was a while there I was doing like 9 interviews a week. And I was just like, this vibration is just like incredible. And it just helped me so much. So my mission in life is to help heal people, help people go have a personal transformation, like really just remember who they are at the core. And, if you would ask me that a few years ago, I would have said, the hell is that bullshit?
Right.
But I've developed this like this side of me that's, I was very alpha, one athlete, jock, bartender, like, and I've developed a different side that is like a more well-rounded human that I wasn't trying to create, but it's just naturally happened. And yeah, so right. It's been a lot of fun and we're just getting started. So
exactly. And this is who you get to be in your one precious life. Like this is who you get to be, just multidimensional, multi-passionate. There's so much to give and to contribute. And yeah, you're just getting started. Awesome. Lance, I feel like you and I could talk for hours. Thank you so much for joining us. So for anyone who's looking for you, where shall we find you? Where do you like to hang out on the internets?
On the interwebs. LanceEssihos.com, and my social media links are lance.essihos. Keep it super simple. And yeah, the crowdfunding campaign for Mastering Adversity, March 1st till April 1st, and then we'll go into the actual launch later. But yeah, we'll have that link for you. Do the show notes, and everybody's welcome. There's going to be little bundles set up. There's going to be like University of Adversity Summit. There's going to be one-on-one coaching. It's going to be some cool stuff. So yeah, it's exciting. And awesome. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. Every time we chat, it's so much fun.
I know you and I, we do have good conversations for sure. For sure. Well, I can't wait to find out what island that I'm meeting you on next, because that's the best way to hang out. But till then, my friend, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.